Everyone, my name is Melanie Brooks, and I am the Marketing and Communications Manager for the Maine Business School. Welcome today to our Inspired Innovators webinar on well-being. And I'd like to take just a moment to introduce our wonderful panelists that are joining us today. Vienna Morrill is the Senior Manager and Lead of the Wellbeing Practice at BerryDunn. David McPherson is the Senior Vice President of Operations at MMG Insurance. Catherine LAMSON is the Senior Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer at MEMIC. LAURIE Mitchell is the Assistant Vice President of Global Wellbeing and Health at UNUM. And Jason Harkins is the Associate Dean of the Maine Business School and the Graduate School of Business. So as we get started, I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions during this webinar, please send them to this email address, which is um.innovators@maine.edu. We hope to be able to get to some questions during this webinar, but it's chock full of really good information. So if you have questions and we don't get to it, know that we can follow up after the fact. I would like to pass it on over to Vienna, who will set the scene for today's topic. Vienna?
Great, thanks a lot, Melanie. Really excited to be here today and to have this conversation about well-being, a topic that I am certainly quite passionate about. So I want to just start off today by saying that well-being is highly personal and really begins with you. At the same time, the people that we surround ourselves with, the places we spend our time, the nature of our daily responsibilities and activities really help shape our ability to thrive personally and professionally, and that the workplace is a primary source of influence. The culture, the people, the benefits, the policies, the behavioral norms, all of these things have a strong influence on our ability to thrive. And certainly thriving people make thriving organizations. And that's why there's such a strong benefit from having this more intentional approach to well-being, which is what we're going to talk about today. So today we use the term we use the term well-being and not wellness, and that is very deliberate. These two terms are often used interchangeably, and that is totally okay. But today we talk about well-being, and that's because traditionally wellness programs have had this focus on health outcomes. And when we talk about well-being, we are thinking about whole person outcomes. And what we mean by that is that well-being is multidimensional. We talk about well-being meaning physical, mental, social, financial, vocational dimensions. And one could argue that there are many, many more dimensions beyond that as well. And ultimately, when we talk about well-being, we're also talking about culture. We're not just thinking about benefits. Wellness programs traditionally often have been seen as this layer. This exists outside of work. But when we talk about well-being, we're really making it part of the way that we work. We're really integrating it. And ultimately, those organizations that are effectively supporting well-being are those that are going to see returns in the form of increased retention, better ability to attract and again, retain talent, performance outcomes, decreased absenteeism, presenteeism being when people are physically, there at the computer and they're in their jobs, but distracted or just disengaged. So as we think about the future of work, whether you're a student making your way into the workplace, whether you're a leader, a manager, an employee reflecting on your own career path, I really hope that today's discussion will demonstrate that well-being really matters and that there are ways that we can better support and harness the energy of all the wonderful humans that make up our organizations.
That's great. So, one of the things that we're gonna hear a lot about today is from our various panelists in terms of the way that well-being is being implemented in their organizations. But in addition to that, we're gonna talk a little bit later in the session about some of the results that we have from a survey that was done both of students at the University of Maine and of employees at a variety of organizations here and from across the state. But just by way of setting the table a little bit, I want to talk about what we were trying to accomplish with this survey. So when we look at well-being, there is, as Vienna just pointed out, this sense of the kind of subjective nature of well-being that is specific to the person. But what's really interesting is that we are trying still to learn about the role that institutions play, or organizations as employers, universities, others, in influencing our well-being. And so we today are going to present you with some of those kind of preliminary findings that came out of the survey that are based on really trying to drive at the question, what is it that organizations can do as they look to influence the outcomes that exist for their employees. And so what we did in asking this question is we really asked three broad questions. We wanted to ask students and employees, how are you doing on these different dimensions that Vienna was just articulating? So how are you doing right now? What's your kind of assessment of where you're at? We wanted to ask them also what it is that they could do from an importance perspective. How can we influence and alter the nature of what is available to address the needs of employees? And then also, and finally, we wanted to ask, how challenging is it for you to manage? And so we're going to share those results with you now. So the results that we got from doing surveys were really interesting because we asked questions about where are you at as an individual in terms, as I just said, in terms of how you're doing right now, how important is it, how challenging is it? And we found that the employees and students had very similar themes as we looked across time in terms of what it is that the needs are. So they identified that their well-being, their perceived well-being was least well developed and most important on the financial and mental well-being dimensions. So basically, how are you doing in terms of managing your mental well-being and your sense of your own well-being there, and then your financial well-being or your ability to control financial outcomes. And what was really interesting is that while there were differences between students and employees, the same dimensions kind of came to the fore. So so let's dive a little bit into a sense, talking to the panel about how is well-being showing up on the leadership agenda for each of your organizations?
Again, I'm Laurie Mitchell from UNUM, also a proud UMaine graduate. Want to throw that in there, and I really appreciate the opportunity today to be part of this panel. Employee well-being is extremely important to leadership. I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and it's quite gratifying to see well-being evolve from what was a nice thing to do or often a side hustle for someone in employee benefits to really an integral strategy, not only to attract and retain employees, as Vienna said in her introduction, but to ensure that they're thriving and that they're engaged personally and professionally. And in the past few years, UNUM and many other employers are beginning to support multidimensional well-being. It's beyond just the physical, it's beyond just a fitness center, and really recognize that there are interdependencies between the physical, the emotional, the financial, and social well-being of your workforce.
Yeah, following up to what Laurie's talking about, so my name's Dave McPherson with MMG Insurance. I would say the biggest change that we're seeing is that the conversation is moving from employee well-being to something that HR has primarily driven in the past to now something that every single frontline leader is realizing that they have a responsibility for with their employees as well. How they are, making sure that people are aware about, what are the services, those multi-dimensional services that a company is offering, from things like the workout facility to, did you realize you could get this out of your 401k plan? Here's some resources with mental health, et cetera. So that's probably the biggest shift that we're seeing is more of that frontline manager just realizing that they have a piece of it and they own it as well, regardless of what department or what their functional area is with their employees.
I would agree with you, Dave. My name is Catherine LAMSON, and I'm with the MEMIC group. And, I'm old enough to remember what things used to be like way back when we began to talk about wellness and wellness committees, and it was all about fitness centers, and we have evolved pretty substantially. And over the past 2 years, I support what Laurie and Dave have shared. But well-being is one of the things that is going to make our organizations be one of those organizations considered to be one of the, an employer of choice, best places to work. We need those particular benefits in order to round out our packages. And over the last 2 years, we've seen through the pandemic that what we thought was probably going to happen in 2030 or 2040 happened in 2021 and 2022 as we all evolved into this remote work, and what effect that had on our employee population and our culture. Looking at physical well-being and mental well-being and financial well-being and finding that balance. And what is that? And I will tell you, we are on day 3 of our reentry here at the MEMIC group. And there are more people here this week than I've seen in more than 2 years. It's kind of exciting, actually. But this well-being component of our programs is really enhancing our culture and creating sort of that balance for those employees, students becoming employees, our employees who are looking for career pathing, career development, enhancement. We are trying to provide the whole package. And, if we don't address the needs of the people who work here, we won't have a successful company, because they will easily in this market find some place and someone who will fulfill those needs.
Excellent points. And as I was reflecting on this question initially, how is well-being showing up on the leadership agenda? The things that, I immediately thought of our well-being initiative that we have at BerryDunn, which started about 2.5 years ago before the pandemic. And, over that time, we've developed a well-being strategic plan. We have a well-being manager. We have a chief culture and engagement officer who are, really taking leadership for well-being. Well-being is part of our firm's vision. It's part of our values. So there are some very clear and visible ways that well-being is showing up on the leadership agenda. And at the same time, I think specifically to Dave and Catherine's points, like, the wellness program used to be driven by HR, but now we're starting to see that everybody's leading from a place of well-being. HR is not alone in promoting well-being at the firm. And we're seeing leaders and managers across the firm having these open and honest conversations with their teams. They're leading by example. They're demonstrating more vulnerability. They're showing how to set boundaries. They're celebrating examples of taking time for self-care. There's lots of really, really great things I'm seeing. And what's even more is it's trickling down all the way to the staff level. I mean, there's leadership opportunities at all levels of an organization. And I really see people like using well-being as an asset in helping to lead and influence people in a really positive way throughout the firm. So not just on leadership's agenda anymore. I would argue that it's really on everyone's agenda. And that's what's really driving change. And it's just really exciting to see.
Those are really great points, and I'm very pleased that the Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at the University of Maine, John Vollen, is able to join us and talk a little bit about how the University of Maine is thinking about well-being, and talk about some of the exciting things that are happening here as we think about how does that proliferate down throughout this organization and into the student body.
Great, thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to see some of you here on camera, and for those listening in. This was interesting. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to get in a little bit earlier to hear more of this conversation. I would say with our faculty and staff and across higher education throughout the U.S., the conversations that you're having, they're parallel, right, with what we see in higher education. What I was going to talk about a little bit today, and just real briefly, is, but there's actually a move, if you will, focusing more on the well-being now of our students as well, that hasn't always historically been there. We all know that depression, anxiety, social anxiety has been increasing, especially anxiety and social anxiety for the last 10 years. And there's lots of potential reasons for this, lots of correlation evidence, that ties it to a lot of things that are going on in our world. And certainly the pandemic has only added, fuel to that. And so the University of Maine is actually part of a coalition of universities. There's about 13 universities right now involved. This includes University of Virginia, Wellesley, Bates, Wake Forest, Arizona State University, University of Connecticut. So it's a really great group. And if you notice anything about those names, they're from elite, small liberal arts colleges to very big research powerhouses, if you will, public universities. This coalition, it's called the Coalition for Life Transformative Education. We came together because of some evidence that came out. Purdue used to partner with Gallup, and they had this Gallup-Purdue poll, and they would look at well-being, and it was out there for many years. And in around 2015, 2016, they came out and a very large poll, over 100,000 people that had graduated anywhere from, recent grads all the way up to 20 years ago. And what they noticed is that the students, and it had a long-term effect, 20 years after graduation, those that had the most job satisfaction, well-being in the job, as well as overall, kind of well-being, in their lives, was tied to some events, very strong correlation to during their undergraduate years, they had very strong relationship that someone actually cared about them, right? And it was also tied into being able to take what they learned in the classroom and have a very meaningful experiential learning, whether it was through an internship, a co-op, or something like that. Those two aspects really helped connect students into their future career and looking at well-being overall. And it really comes into looking at agency, sense of identity, sense of purpose. One thing that we have come together also is we're looking at how can we help develop that sense of community, that sense of belonging among our students. And so this coalition's actually come together, and we all have different models on how we are addressing it, but with this kind of basis, if you will, that we want to make sure that we scale these life transformative educational components to all of our students. I have 4 minutes, so I probably used it up. So I won't go into all the details, but I will say that I think it is so important. We see our students coming back. This pandemic, you see it across the course K through 12, and of course higher ed, has been just really devastating for our students overall. And so while this was important before, it's even doubly, we need to double down on this right now. And so I think it's actually an exciting time for higher ed, and it'll be interesting to see how all this continues to grow.
Great. Thank you so much, Provost Vollen, for joining us. Appreciate your time today and sharing what the university is doing. The next question that I would like to pose to our panelists is I'd like to ask them each to share one or maybe two things that their organization is doing or planning to implement to enhance well-being within their organizations. Who'd like to start? Go ahead, Catherine.
That it's kind of an exciting time right now as we're re-entering the workforce and so forth, but we have spent a great deal of time thinking about well-being in our organization. And much like the survey results, we have people who are particularly interested in having access to support for their well-being in any number of areas 24/7. So our benefit packages are being adjusted such that we can add program, we can add supports, even software programs to help provide that resource that employees are looking for. One that we have is Restore Resilience, and it's always available. It's a stress reduction and a lifestyle improvement program. And during these challenging times, it's been utilized a great deal. When we first put it in, it didn't have a lot of utilization. It definitely does now. You can have coaches, you can talk to people about your sleep, that your basic life habits, food, any of the things that are concerning you, and find a resource group to help you. Nutrition, exercise, and sleep seem to be the things that people are most focused on from a work perspective. And we also have programs that coordinate with our health provider, because this is all separate from the health provider. The health provider has programs that utilize technology, your wearables and so forth, so you can keep track of your steps, your sleep habits. You can keep track of and earn points in some of these things too, to actually earn an Apple Watch, which is, for some people, is really important. And they upgrade them periodically. So all those steps that you're taking benefit you. But there's a lot of that's happening, and it's coordinated through our total benefit package. In addition, our wellness, and we do still call it a wellness committee, but our wellness committee has broken out into subgroups dealing with the well-being components, and one of them being financial, and we're doing a great deal of work with our 401k provider, so people understand how it works, how to build your wealth, build your retirement nest egg. And as students come from a school environment where generally their health insurance is probably still provided by their parents until they're 26, this is a great opportunity to start to build your wealth for retirement. And as I always tell them when I meet them, the objective of this is to get as much money out of the employer pocket and get it into your pocket. It will benefit you later. And to talk about that and keep that in front of employees so they understand the security that will provide in the future. And in this current time of inflation, prices, that students, employees, new employees, they're all watching this. So we're trying to provide the resources to make people comfortable and realize how they can utilize what's being offered by us to help benefit them today, tomorrow, and well into the future.
Yeah, very similar to what Catherine talked about. MMG is, we're asking a lot of questions and we're getting a lot of help, even from outside vendors such as BerryDunn. And we're asking our employees, what do you want? What is missing? What more can we do for you to make sure that we're putting our efforts into those right areas? As well as there's a little bit of re-education going on from a standpoint of there were benefits that were available, like from our health insurer, that people didn't even know that they offered. And I think, the pandemic, such as the telehealth avenue or aspect of benefits was something that we really pushed that a lot of people just never even would have really thought of. Of course, there's also been quite a shift with, as people are starting to come back to work now, we are having to rethink how we are structuring our workspace. And there's a balance here of having the in-person collaboration, but also how do we maintain safety in the new world that we all live in. So that's something that we're also looking at, and there's a balance there. So it's getting a lot of attention for us on that aspect as well.
That's a great example, Dave, with the talking about how you package, promote, and communicate all the great things that you already do to support employee well-being, and the insurance carrier really understanding insurance benefits, because I think a lot of times there's underutilized benefits, and a lot of times they're on the preventative health side too. And insurance carriers are starting to do more and more and really come up to speed in the well-being space. So that's something that we're focused on internally, this packaging of our benefits, looking how we pull everything together in an integrated package. And that Dave mentioned something that we're helping our clients with as well. So that first step of really mapping everything out, like looking at our 5 dimensions of well-being and thinking about what are the benefits and resources and programs that we have in place to support each of these dimensions. And once we build that big picture, which is kind of where we're at now, really making it as easy as possible for our employees to access that information. And we do some traditional communication channels to achieve that, one of them being a web page that's accessible to our employees, that's updated frequently and is engaging and has some fun elements to it as well. Also, we have a quarterly well-being newsletter, which is a great opportunity to continue to reinforce and remind people about all the benefits and resources and programs that are in place. And those traditional communication channels are really helpful in improving the visibility and really setting the tone around well-being. But those things alone aren't enough. If you just kind of put those things out there, it doesn't quite do it, because you really need to get the well-being messaging embedded into the flow of day-to-day work, into teams. And there are 2 things that we're planning to, well, one thing that's kind of already underway, one thing we're planning to implement to help improve that communication strategy. And the first thing is having a well-being champion program. So we have had a well-being committee for some time now, which is awesome. It's an awesome group of people. They do great work. However, it doesn't engage enough people at the firm. We really want to get people engaged across the firm at all our different departments and all our different teams. And it's also more work to be on the committee, honestly, than some people can take on. But there are so many people that are already informal well-being advocates within the firm. And we're really thinking about how can we elevate these people to be true influencers of culture and give them the tools to be more successful and support their team. So that's one thing that we're doing. Another great example that comes to mind is, I'll mention our well-being manager again. Shout out to Jenny Sear, who recently joined our team and has just been a great asset. She has really been getting out there and meeting with our departments and having conversations. And this all started with our tax team. Our tax leadership realized, okay, we have another busy season coming up. We're in year 2 of a pandemic. Like, tax season is ripe for burnout for people, and we really trying to do everything we can to avoid that. And so we came up with a strategy where our well-being manager teamed up, also our fitness provider Shift, and they all worked together to come up with some specialized programming for the tax team. And as part of that, our well-being manager was joining these departmental meetings and having conversations and giving an overview of the benefits and the upcoming programming, and word started to spread. And now we have a lot of departments who are coming to our well-being manager and saying, hey, can you join our standing meeting for 15 or 20 minutes? Can you talk about the benefits, some of the upcoming programs? And then even sometimes, can you facilitate a conversation about a well-being topic? Recently, we had one on the topic of self-care, which was, what does self-care look like to you? How do you fit it in? And when these conversations start happening at the team level, that's where you really start to see well-being being normalized. And that's where we really start to see this shift and this change. So, when I think about communication, promoting, packaging, it starts with really getting clear on your benefits, but then it's really about finding every opportunity you can to integrate that messaging, in different ways and make it part of work in the day-to-day.
Well, it's really so great to hear all the wonderful work that's going on at our employers here in Maine and even outside of Maine as we think about how well-being can permeate an organization and doesn't just need to sit within the benefits area or within HR. And that's what we're trying to do here at UNUM as well. Last year, we surveyed employees and we held a number of focus groups. And what employees shared back with us was, it was a lot, but they told us that flexibility was of primary importance. And it really enhanced their work-life balance, and which we know goes a long way towards alleviating stress. So for the 55% of our US employees at our home office locations, we're addressing that through a flexible in-office schedule. And we're asking employees to be in the office 8 to 10 days a month. The other days, they are welcome to work remotely. But we do feel that being in the office at least some of the time is important for your team meetings, customer meetings, and for collaboration. A lot of collaboration happens spontaneously. And I can tell you that that's been the case for me the past 2 days as UNUM employees have come back into the home office. There have been more here yesterday and today than there have been in the last 2 years. And I've seen people in person that I haven't seen since pre-pandemic. So there's a little bit of joy that brings to my day when I see former colleagues in person. We've also added more support programs and services for all employees, whether they're in the office or remote. And we're particularly focused on emotional well-being, mental health, and financial well-being. These were the other areas that we heard back from our employees that were also very important to them. And really, it's those moments that matter whenever they come up. And because 45% of our US workforce are actually permanent remote workers, and the remainder aren't in the office every day, our programs need to be universally inclusive, which means that we need to leverage technology and digital solutions to reach employees wherever they are, whenever they want to access a program. Offering things on site while we still do that, it's not enough anymore. Our in-office amenities are still important, and we do have fitness centers, although we've started to offer our classes, our in-person classes virtually. So our classes aren't limited to only those employees who come into a home office location. They can join from anywhere. So it's really fun for me to join a yoga class in Portland with colleagues from Chattanooga or Columbia or across the US. We also have healthy, low-cost meals in our cafeteria. We have quiet rooms. We have walking workstations. We have Starbucks. And I know that Catherine has these social areas too, and she has a pool table at MEMIC. UNUM has a little bit of that. We have things like foosball and ping pong and cornhole where people can just go and hang out and relax. So really trying to take that holistic approach to well-being. And as I think everyone has mentioned here, have it permeate throughout the organization and to our managers, to our frontline employees, to our leaders. So it really becomes part of our culture and how we do business.
So a lot of those things that you all just mentioned, I think are really reflected in what we see in the survey, and certainly what we see in talking to students and employees in organizations of all different sizes. This notion that you can enhance my well-being as a person by giving me some time, by providing me with flexibility around that work-life balance, and helping me learn how to manage my own well-being. They really come out in what we saw for themes, whether it was for employees or students. You know, a couple of the examples that I thought were really interesting and really drive home how all of the things that your organizations are doing are speaking to this core need that employees are recognizing are things like people saying as part of their physical employee, not only as part of their physical well-being, not only can you do things like making work breaks to exercise the norm at work so that I can find a time to work out, not at 4 a.m. or 8 p.m., but during the day. But it is those things that, like you were just talking about, Laurie, where you can provide me with healthy snacks and meal options, and you can make it easier for me to access things that enhance my physical well-being. In the social well-being, one of the most interesting things that I brought forward out of the comments in terms of the themes is students and employees were really looking at a way that organizations and institutions can enhance their social well-being by encouraging them to volunteer, to give them space to identify those volunteer activities and to coordinate that. So it's not just Jason is interested in volunteering, he has to go find a nonprofit and then do a thing. But if my institution can bring together a team, it makes it easier for me to enhance my social well-being in that way. And my mental well-being, we all know that the access and demands around being able to access a therapist or a counselor, somebody to address an acute or an existing sense of depression and anxiety, as the provost was talking about earlier, are true. But we also saw themes around looking at how do I train my managers to exactly what Vienna was talking about earlier. How do I drive this really all the way down into the organization? So it's not in HR, it's not, oh, you can go see this therapist practice, or we bought access to this online subscription, but you have people in your area group who are focused on enhancing and developing your mental well-being. The financial one, the most interesting thing, of course, they said, I'd love to get paid more, or students said, I'd love to pay less in tuition, and that's great. And we can certainly do those things. But what was amazing to me was the number of people who said, I really need you to help me understand how to do better. Listening to the Dave Ramsey or reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or, whatever it is that I am supposed to be doing doesn't necessarily help me understand what my goals should be given where I'm at in life, and then how to enhance that. And then kind of the last area that we asked them about vocational well-being, people are really interested in understanding not only what are my career paths within this organization. All of your organizations here have multiple paths that early stage employees can take and mid-career employees can take, but they're also really interested in understanding the why of their job. They see vocational well-being as being tied into an understanding about why they're doing what they're doing, that it matters to the organization and not just that they're undertaking some sort of task. And so all of those points that you all were making about the ways that you're already thinking about that came forward from employees and students as they're thinking about how can organizations really enhance my well-being.
Yeah, something, as I was listening to the answers of that last question, something that Vienna had said stuck out to me, which led me to another question. The popularity of her well-being manager at BerryDunn as possibly a new position. I'm wondering from you all, when you think about the well-being strategies that have been implemented in your organizations, what are some of the things that have been the most influential or even the most transformational for your employees at your workplaces?
I would say, I'll start off with that. I would definitely say to what Catherine was talking about and Laurie with regards to flexibility, because, and I don't just mean flexibility about, what days of the week you're going to be in the office, but also flexibility about where you even do your job, right? I mean, sometimes like we'll have situations where a spouse they go on family vacation, but maybe they want some flexibility to even do some work, while they are in Florida or in Arizona. And so we're challenging ourselves on some of the ways we've been thinking in the past, as I kind of refer to them as the sacred cows of the workplace of old, being challenged in regard to say, well, we've clearly proven that people know how to work remotely. So why does it matter in some cases, for short periods of time to be able to allow them that kind of flexibility to work where they need to? So that's one of the areas that, because it purely from a business, standpoint, it's far better to, keep the employees than it is to, be rigid, not demonstrate the flexibility, and then it's tougher to go find someone to replace them. So none of us want to, have to do that, especially in the way things are today. So I think just really challenging ourselves on what flexibility means, how far can we go with it, and that's really been the most transformative for us.
I would agree with you, Dave. I think that's really important. We've had the same issues here. We have probably, and I was trying to think of what the number might be, but at this point, probably 50% of our population, employee population, is remote for the most part. Remote. They show up every once in a while, and I know Laurie, has their 8 to 10 days a month, and they've transitioned, trying to find what is the right policy and practice, and we're all doing that. We all do that, but flexibility is really important. We are seeing how we are transferring knowledge from those senior people who have all that intellectual material that, frankly, in 5 or 10 years, it's probably going to be a different system and you won't need all that. And B, the fundamentals need to transfer from one person to the next person. So we are being very flexible about how we're doing that, how we're transitioning, and really developing career pathing programs and advertising them. So it's a challenge. I will admit it is a challenge. Being remote, we don't always have the opportunity to oversee what somebody in another division is doing to see if we might be interested in that. So we have to be very overt about making those opportunities available for people and job shadowing. And we're just starting to get to that as people are starting to return, even if it's only a day a week or 2 days a week or what have you. So that, being flexible with that. Laurie mentioned that we have respite space, and our respite space is, it's really designed for getting coffee, eating your lunch, in some cases playing pool, watching, an international sports event. But it's also places where people go to work. You dress for your day. We don't all look so formal like we used to. We dress for our day, and it's not uncommon to find people with their laptops and a pad and sitting there with their shoes off, feet on the couch, talking on the phone, working on their computers and so forth. And it creates a whole different environment that's very welcoming and more diverse than it has been. And I think productivity is improving with all of that. We each have a job to do. Does it really matter if you do it between 8 and 3 or 9 and 3, or can you do it between 7 and noon and go to somebody's ball game or pick somebody up or drop somebody off, or do elder care for an hour or two and then come back and finish it? I think that's what we're seeing now, and I do believe I think that's the new world of work, and how we measure productivity. I don't think we've perfected that. It's a work in progress, but we have to be available to our customers. We're a mission-driven organization. I would say insurance is a pretty mission-driven organization. We're service providers. We can do some of our work later in the evening when our customers are at home. I think we have to think about things slightly different, and we have to figure out how to transition to the next generation. High tech and high touch can go together.
Absolutely. As you were talking, Catherine, about kind of splitting your day, starting earlier and finishing later, it just reminded me of what COVID was like in my house, right? I think everyone had to sort of exercise that flexibility in their lives, especially if they have children during that time. And it, it didn't fall apart. It kept going. Laurie, do you have anything that sticks out in your mind as something that you've done that has worked?
Yes, a couple of things. In addition to, I couldn't agree more with everything that Catherine just said, and that the importance of flexibility. We figured it out during the pandemic. We can't leave it behind. It's so important to our collective workforces that they have the flexibility, how, when, where they do their work. But we've also done some other things. We did really double down when it came to emotional well-being and mental health this year, and we implemented a digital behavioral health solution. There's something for everyone. It's not just for mental ill health, although there is a component that addresses that, and it primarily focuses on emotional intelligence, stress, building resilience. Those aren't muscles that we all have, especially early in our lives and early in our careers. So this program really helps employees wherever they are on their emotional well-being journey and their mental health, on the spectrum of mental health, to start to develop those skills and have those resources available to them to address things like stress, burnout, anxiety, and depression. And we've seen really terrific engagement. We're 2 months in, and we have over 31% of our employees who have registered and engaged. And that's a lot. That's really great program participation. And one thing I've heard, and I think it's a pretty common theme for most employers, is one of the greatest challenges is making sure that your employees know where these programs are and are aware of them when they want them or need them. It's a big challenge, and this is, I think, another reason why we're all trying to think about how does well-being not just come from HR, not just come from leaders, but come from managers, come from peers. We've been doing some mental health first aid training with our employees across UNUM, so that there is that kind of peer support system for employees when they don't know where to go or they don't know what the resources are. So I would say that's been a big focus and something that we've done recently that we're very excited about.
I know that the example I used, Vienna, was yours, but I'm hoping that you have something that else that you could share.
Well, I would just like to piggyback a little bit and say, oh my gosh, flexibility is huge. Absolutely. I think it's been said. I won't go on too much about it. I just want to acknowledge that I think a really important element of flexibility is trust. And that's something we've been talking about a little bit more. How do we cultivate trust and develop trust? I think COVID actually, for many people, accelerated that conversation. I mean, just people showing up more, often authentically, people having more empathy. These things really help support flexibility and, help those conversations. So I think flexibility is very important. Trust is very important. The mental health conversation is huge. That's something we are also currently really thinking about. How do we do more there? The mental health first aid training is a great example and something that we're currently exploring. I'm thinking, another example when you talk about something that's been really transformative, and it goes back to good old fashioned wellness, I guess, is we actually partnered with a company it was first to create a fitness center in our headquarters office. We're working with a company called Shift, but it's about much more than just the fitness center in our headquarters office. We're really working with them to find all different types of programming that we can offer all of our employees wherever they're located, and really put out consistent messaging that we want you to move throughout the day, whatever that means, getting up from your desk. We're doing stretch breaks with them now regularly, and broadcast, having those available to the entire firm, offering personal training at a competitive rate and making that a virtual offering as well, virtual classes. And I think all of this, whether people are directly participating in these offerings or not, it's really helping to set a tone that it is okay to move your body during the day, and helping people like unchain themselves from the desk, which I think is just really, really important, is just having that time to distance ourselves from technology. And there's a social well-being component as well. A lot of the initiatives that they're leading are things that also allow people a chance to socially connect. Activity challenges, for example, step challenges. We have a walking club in our Portland office, and hoping to get that out to some of our other offices as well. So these things, again, they help set that tone that this is important and something that we really care about and support. And I would say that has been quite transformative for us.
Something that's really been transformative and incredibly valuable at the university has been a focus increasingly and really intentionally around the flexibility that we've all talked about, and the compassion, and how do we meet faculty and staff where they're at to provide some of that flexibility and address their core needs and the way that they think about it. But then also, how do we drive at creating a sense with students that, hey, we want to know where you're at. We want to know and understand what is it that you need, and how do we meet you, not by creating a sense of here's the schedule in this course for you, or here's how you can teach on this day but not that day. It's nothing like that, but it's all of the things that you've been emphasizing, all of you, in terms of what you're doing at your firm. We're trying to drive that down and make sure that students understand. We want to understand where you're at. We want you to have a sense of that personal well-being, that agency that the provost was talking about earlier. But we also want to then emphasize and build on that, a sense that if you're sharing with us and we understand how important it is to create a space where you feel comfortable and safe sharing information about what your needs are, then we will, where we can, accommodate it, and where we can't, we'll communicate, and we'll look for better solutions in ways that are meeting the opportunities that are in front of us. And that has really been transformational, because it's altering the relationship between the student or the employee, I think, and the employer or the faculty member.
One other comment that I wanted to add on top of what Jason's talking about is that very similar to Catherine, I've been in the industry for a long time now, and what I saw is we used to talk about work-life balance, okay, and that used to be the phrase, and that I think that really conveyed there was two separate things there. I go to work and then I have my life. I think that's completely blown up now. And now it's much more of a blended, the pandemic caused it, now, the flexibility and everything we're talking about. And so I think, well-being really has replaced the phrase now, and that's how we're talking about internally. I don't hear as much, the phrase used anymore about how do we maintain that work-life balance. Now it really is more of a shift to how do we maintain, well-being for our employees.
That's so true. Man, we really filled up this hour, didn't we? We've got about 5 minutes left, and I know that we could probably do multiple of these discussions about well-being, and this is just the beginning. So I'm going to pass it off to Jason to bring us home, and go right ahead.
Well, I want to start just by, offering real thanks. So Vienna and BerryDunn have been partnering with us at the University of Maine around this notion of well-being and bringing this forward. We've been in partnership on developing the survey and then building these partnerships with MMG and UNUM and MEMIC and a variety of other organizations from across the state, all of which are emphasizing and saying, we're doing important work and we're trying really hard to meet our employees or our students where they're at. But we also recognize that there are opportunities for us to do better and for us to build really a community of practice and some thought leadership, partnering the University of Maine with
organizations of all different sizes to think, how can Maine lead the way as it relates to well-being? And what Dave just said there at the end, I think it speaks so much to the power and importance of the way that we talk about these things. When we stop talking about it as work/life balance, as he said, as though they are two separate things, and we start talking about the whole person and creating space for them to be as an employee, as a father, or mother, as a member of the softball team, whatever their identities are, that creates new opportunities for us to get better about supporting people and helping them to achieve their kind of individual goals. As Melanie said, I think that this is the beginning of a conversation. There are so many great comments that employees and students made. Our goal is to continue to work with organizations like those on the panel that have joined us today, but then also to start thinking about how do we expand this conversation. All of your organizations are so blessed, really, to have people in the organization thinking about this, and how do we then make sure that smaller companies throughout the state of Maine have access to similar lines of thinking and develop opportunities to participate in this conversation, understand what are best practices and how they can actually support the people that work for them. So this has been, I really appreciated the conversation. I've really appreciated the partnership of all of your organizations, and we really look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you so much, Jason. And Catherine, Vienna, Laurie, and Dave, we couldn't have done this without you. Thank you for bringing your insight and expertise about well-being in your businesses to this event today. And thank you to everybody who was watching. I'll be sure to share a link to the recording if you would like to share it with others. And I hope you all have a really fabulous afternoon.